thing is that you always have to see the resources that are shared, because it's very little time. 1 hour is very little time to teach you everything about machine learning algorithmically and mathematically. So I really want you guys to start understanding everything from scratch, and those videos, all of them are very important for that. They give you like the proper mathematical foundation. I know that a lot of people doing machine learning, even in my batch, they don't know the maths behind it. They know how to use sklearn and how to apply models, but if you really want to get good at machine learning, and what will separate you from the rest of the people will be that you understand what is happening behind the scenes, behind the function calls of the models. Okay, so at least the Andrew NG videos that were shared, like I think there was a playlist of 7 videos. I hope all of you have gone through that. That's very important, not just for now, but in the future also. You can actually just go through the entire YouTube playlist whenever you find time for like it. Okay, so did anyone have any doubts in the videos that you may have seen, or did you guys not see it? Did you all understand everything that was there?
Yes, we.
I had a doubt in the cost function. The
With the logistic
like
regression cost function.
yeah, so a different optimized cost function was used there, right?
Yeah,
So while we were doing the linear regression type, it had we had divided it by 1/2, the cost function,
yeah.
but we are not doing it here. Is there any particular reason for it?
Yeah, actually, the particular reason for it is nothing to do with logic. It actually is something to do with mathematical stability. So, in linear regression, you divide by 2 because there is a square term. So, the cost function was a square term, as in it was a square difference between predicted values and between actual values. So, what happens is during gradient descent, we have to compute the first order derivative, like the derivative of the cost function, and the derivative of any square term has 2, right? Like if I tell you the derivative of x square, that is 2x. So there the 2 gets cancelled with 1/2m. That is the only reason they had introduced 1/2, and they had also found that it is experimentally better. Matlab, when you do gradient descent, it converges better when you use 1/2 as a constant. That is the only reason. It has nothing to do with logic. It's more about implementation. Okay, so I'll come to the logistic regression cost function in detail. That's when I'll show you more, tell you more about the cost function. So I'll let me first just get started with logistic regression. Anyone else has any other questions? Okay, so as usual, you can open the GitHub that we use every week, and I've uploaded a notebook. It's called LR sklearn. LR stands for logistic regression, and you can follow along. Yeah, so and this is the data set. I'll show it to you here, but you can explore the CSV file also. So what our goal is here is that we are given the gender of a particular person and the age and the estimated salary, and we are supposed to predict whether they purchase a product or not. This product can be anything, but based on the gender, age, and salary, we're supposed to predict whether or not they'll purchase the product. So now the difference between a regression task and a classification task mainly is that there are only two, no, not only two, but there are limited set of values that the target variable can take in classification tasks. So right now it's a binary classification task. That means that it can take either 0 or 1. So whenever a product is purchased, it's 1, otherwise it's 0. Whereas in regression, you can take any values, right? You can take, it can be 5,000, it can be 2,300, it can be 1.202. So there can be any continuous values, whereas here there are a fixed set of values. Okay, so now I want someone to tell me quickly why we cannot use, or why if we use linear regression for classification, why would we start having problems?
If we have outliers in our data set, then there would be a problem to be predicted or like to get a right answer in it.
Yeah, exactly. So not just outliers. Basically, based on each point, our regression line will try and fit all the points well. So that won't be a nice thing. And additionally, a very, very important point is that whatever we get in regression, firstly, it's just a straight line, so it cannot learn good decision boundaries. Here, you'll see there's some curve, and even more importantly, the probability here, whatever your cost function will give you, is between. So the cost function, whatever your hypothesis here gives you, is a value between 0 and 1 always. So this is the graph of the sigmoid function. Okay, can you see this? So forget the x-axis for now, just look at the y-axis. So based on our prediction, we'll always get something between 0 and 1. Okay, so here, as you can see, whenever this x-axis part is less than 0, our prediction goes close towards 0, otherwise it's 1. So here 1 means full confidence that a category 1 is like a particular category is predicted, and as it keeps going lower, it says that, okay, this is not, it's more and more likely that this other category will get predicted. So for two categories, this is how it works. It's actually a probability between 0 and 1, whereas there you can get any sort of number. By number I mean that you could get a value less than 0, or you could get a value more than 1, because in linear regression there are continuous values. Obviously, a well-trained linear regression model will give you numbers between 0 and 1 if the data set is good. Otherwise, you'll always have problems of keeping the prediction between 0 and 1. Okay, so that is one thing. And this is why I really hope that you guys have watched Andrew Ng's videos, because the first video where he explains why linear regression should not be used and logistic regression should be used, that is, I feel, very, very important. Okay, so yeah, anyway. Okay, so now let's talk more about the x-axis. So in how did we in linear regression, how did we predict a predicted value? Does anyone remember? Like, how did we make a prediction using our model?
We use the cost function to we use the gradient descent on the cost function.
Yeah, that was to get proper values for theta. But how did we make a prediction? So to make a prediction, we had a optimized theta matrix and we multiplied that by x. So when we had theta transpose x, we'd get a certain value. That was our predicted value, remember? So I'll just, okay, what I'll do is I'll just show you quickly. So in linear regression, this was how we predicted, right? X dot theta. So you have your feature vector, which will be this vector, a particular row, and you multiply that by the weights. So that is how you get theta 0 x0 plus theta 1 x1 plus theta 2 x2. Remember, so that would give you a prediction. Here we use something similar, but it's just that to get this particular equation, we have to use this function. Okay, so this is called the sigmoid function. And this equation that you see is of the sigmoid function. So can anyone tell me what x here should be? In our case, what should we use in place of x to get a predicted value?
The function which we have, like y is equal to something.
Yeah, and what is that function?
It contains all the columns which we are using for predicting.
It will contain the product of theta and x. Exactly how like this was. Like this is a product of x and one sec, where is it? This is a product of x and theta, right? The predictions. So similarly, we'll put x dot theta in the x value here, okay? So what this will become is 1 plus e raised to minus x, where x is theta transpose x, okay? So just to make it clear, 1 second, I'll just show you one part of a video. I am really, this is why I really wanted you guys to see the videos. I'll just explain it again 1 minute. Okay, so just a minute. Yeah, you can see the screen now. Uh, can you see what in this? Can you see what they've replaced x by? They've replaced x by theta transpose x. And what is theta transpose x? That's the product of our weights and our features. So say I have a feature called age, uh, category, sorry, age, gender, and salary. Okay, so that will be that will be my x vector. Say my age is 50, salary is 20,000, and gender is male. So that will be my x vector, and theta will be the optimized weight matrix that we get after gradient descent. So initially, theta will just be random values. What we are trying to achieve here is get something like in a straight line, how we had theta 0 plus theta 1 x1 plus theta 2 x2. So we are trying to achieve something similar like that. But whenever you apply a function to this, you apply a sigmoid function to this, instead of outputting values from everywhere, it will constrain the value between 0 and 1. Okay. Yeah. Uh, does anyone want to ask anything? Okay, did you all understand up to this point?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll shut this now. Okay, so now let's focus on our model. Even if you don't know the math that well, it's okay. But like I said, that is what will differentiate you from the others. So our model is going to take in this feature vector, and as usual, what we do here is some feature scaling. I'll explain this code later on. Last week I had asked a question, and this is what explains it. But for now, first let's look at the gender. So, like I said, the gender is a categorical variable. Okay, so we have to transform it, and this is some code I really want you to pay attention to because you'll be using this a lot with data frames. Whenever we have data frames, it's always advisable to use lambda functions. So this is called a lambda function, and not use a for loop because obviously here there are only 400 values, but when you have data sets of like 10,000, 1 million, then a for loop is very slow. So this is what you have to use, and it'll achieve a lot of speed up. So here, what I'm trying to do is, if gender is male, so I'm trying to put x equal to 1. Otherwise, I'm trying to put 0 for female. Okay, because this is what our data set looks like: male, male, female. And like I already explained earlier, we can only give numbers to our model because it won't understand this. Okay, so can anyone last week we had used target encoder, like we had used this thing, one hot encoder, sorry, to encode the categories. And this time I'm just directly using 1 and 0. Can anyone tell me why I'm doing that?
One and zero would not have any much significance. Like in dummy encoding, we had to put it in vector form, like 100 and 010 and else. But
Yeah.
here it can be used in that way.
So see what happens is if you have more than two categories, then when you encode it, you will get something like this. So 0 indicates that this is, suppose this is female and this is male. This indicates that there's a 0 in the female column and there's 1 in the male column. Okay. But now when we have only two variables, then we'll only get like two columns like this. When we had more than two variables, say we had five different things inside a category, like if I had place where you live, so you can have five different cities and then you'll have five columns. but here we only have two columns. And does anyone remember the dummy variable trap? Does anyone remember why we always used to remove one column from this encoded data?
Because one variable would start predicting the value of the other, and
Yeah, because that's called multicollinearity. Okay, so because of that, we always remove one. Okay, so now you tell me, if I remove one column from here, say only take the second column, then it's 11001, right? So that will give me the same result as this. So just to save a step, I have done this. So remember that whenever you have only two categories within a column, you can directly assign them values. Otherwise, you always have to use a encoder and then remove one feature. Okay, so say you have five features in a column, you have to use one hot encoder, then you'll get five columns. Well, out of that, you have to only use four to prevent the dummy variable trap. So after this, pretty much everything is what we have done before. I split it, then I what I did here was only, so I didn't use user ID because obviously user ID doesn't make any sense, right? User ID won't contribute towards the prediction. We are trying to understand how the gender, age, and salary affects the purchase. So user ID doesn't have any meaning here. And I have split the I have split the data set like this, with 25% as my test data. Now, a very important thing that you have to remember is, okay, so what happens if right now, okay, I'll come to that in a lot of detail tomorrow, because tomorrow we are only going to talk about hyperparameter tuning and evaluating classification models. But remember that between regression and classification, there's a lot of difference in splitting the data set. So now, say I have two categories here, and say after my split, my test data doesn't contain any purchased entries. So in the test data, say that, okay, so say this is my entire data set of four values, uh, or yeah, so say this is my entire data set. Out of this, in my suppose random, because we are randomly splitting, say that my test data only gets values where purchased is equal to zero. So in that case, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
bad thing.
Yeah, and why? So it's bad because when we are testing, we want to have both kinds of things, right? We want to see whether our model is able to predict people who have purchased and people who have not purchased. Whereas in regression, it doesn't matter because you just have, say you have housing prices. Now, if there are five values also, they're still going to be housing prices, so it won't matter. But in classification, it makes a lot of difference. Okay, so because today is like just the first turn for classification. Tomorrow I'll get into more detail of how to make sure that your test data contains both the values and how it's a balanced split. But right now we won't need it. And then, okay, I hope you all remember feature scaling. This was just subtracting the mean and dividing by standard deviation. So we have to do the same thing here. And now this is the new thing here. We are going to do logistic regression. So when we fit the model, we use something called sklearn, and we fit the model on our training data, and then we make predictions. Okay, so this is very very important. This is what we have got. So we obviously make predictions on a test set, and after that we get something called as a confusion matrix. Okay, so I want you guys to look at this, and I want someone to explain to me what this is. You can see the labels here and explain to me what these values are. So I'll tell you that the sum of all these values is equal to 100, and our test data size is also 100. So we have 100 values in our test data, and this is the confusion matrix for 100 values. Now, can you explain to me what this is trying to say, and how would you measure accuracy using this matrix?
It is showing that 65 values had the true label of 0, and predicted values are also 65. So these are the correct ones for the zero value. Then similarly for the one value, there are 25 values as such.
Yeah. So
Then
yeah, sorry. Go on. Yeah.
yeah, so like to get the accuracy, we can see that 65 plus 25 are the right values that our model has predicted, and 10 values are wrong. So 90 by 100 or 90%.
Yeah. Good. So exactly what is happening here is a true label means the value is, say the label is 0. Our model has also predicted the true label, as in it has predicted that those values will be 0. And similarly, so the diagonal is called the true labels. Okay, you can see this diagonal 65 and 25, both are true labels. Now what is very interesting is these other two values. So here you can see that the true label is 3. Okay, but our model has predicted 1. So what will this be called? So this is called false positives. Okay, because these aren't supposed to be positives. Like these three values are supposed to be 0 because the true label is 0, but our model has predicted that they'll be 1. So that's why these are called false positives. And similarly, using similar logic, these should have been 1, but our model has predicted them to be 0. So these are false negatives. Okay, so remember this. You don't have to mug everything up. Like I see a lot of people put in false positives, false negatives in the matrix, but just remember that whatever is falsely classified as positive is called false positive, and whatever is falsely classified as negative is called false negative. So here you can see that the predicted label is 0, but it should be 1. So it's falsely classified as negative. That's why it's false negative. And here the true label is 1. The true label is 0, but predicted label is 1. So it's falsely classified as 1. That's why it's a false positive. Okay, so now if I ask you that in our data set, like in our training set, how many values had purchased equal to 0, then how would you find that out? Like, how would you find out how many values are in the test set are actually 0 and how many values are actually 1? Just using this matrix.
68 values.
Yeah, 68 will be 0, right? Because 65 plus 3, you can see that the true label is 0. So it's just the sum of this row. And similarly for 1, 32 values are 1. So is our test data balanced? As in, by balanced, what I mean to say is, if I have 100 values, if I have in those 100 values, if 50 are 0 and 50 are 1, then I can say that my test data is balanced. But in this case, is it balanced?
No.
Okay, no. So, and like I said before, that is not a good thing. So we would like that our test data is as balanced as possible. Otherwise, it could create problems. And can anyone? I'll go into a lot of detail on this tomorrow, because tomorrow I'll actually show you multi-class classification and how to evaluate classification and tune models. But today I just wanted, I just want, can anyone just like guess or just think that why should we have a balanced data set mathematically?
Because it would not be biased towards one result.
Yeah, good. So now what happens is, okay, forget this example. Say we had 100 values, and in our test data, out of those 100, 99 were zeros, and uh, then only one value was 1. Okay. So this is actually very possible. Say I have a data of people who have cancer. So obviously most people are not likely to have cancer. So if say the 99 people did not have cancer and one person actually has cancer in the test data set, but it's very very important that even if it's one, we identify that one correctly. Like here you can see that total there are 10 mistakes made by the model. So 10 things are wrongly classified, but it would be horrible if we were not able to correctly classify that one person who had cancer, because obviously we are expecting that only a very very rare people will have rare number of people will have cancer. And if our model is not able to pick up on that, then it's in deep trouble. Okay, because the whole point of building a model was to help us predict that. But this is called imbalanced data, and in that case, what would our accuracy be? So, say what I'm actually trying to ask is, we have 100 people. Out of that, 99 have cancer. Sorry, so 99 don't have cancer, and one has cancer. And our model predicts that all 100 don't have cancer. So, in that case, what is the accuracy?
99%.
Yeah, 99%. Okay, so did you all understand how it's 99%? Because 99 people were correctly classified. So out of 100 people, out of 100 people, 99 had cancer. Sorry, 90. I'm sorry, keep saying it wrong. I'm sorry. So 99 didn't have cancer, and our model predicted that all 100 don't have cancer. So the accuracy is 99%, right? It just made one mistake of classifying the person who has cancer and saying that that person doesn't have cancer. But you can see how costly that mistake is, because now imagine that that person actually has cancer and a model has predicted that they don't have cancer. In that case, they won't get any medical help further because a model hasn't picked that up. But still, our model is showing 99% accuracy. So this is why accuracy is not a good metric. Tomorrow we'll go into more mathematical detail and I'll explain what other metrics to use. But this is the whole point of making a balanced split, and that is why sometimes it's not possible. Okay, like when I say that out of my 100 test data, there should be 50-50. Sometimes it's obviously not possible, because in cases like the cancer case, it won't be even. Like there'll always be lesser people who have cancer than people who don't have cancer. So in that case, you have to deal with something. And this is a little bit of homework that I'm going to give you. I'm going to go through documentations now, and this is how we actually do machine learning. Like we have to look up certain features in the documentations, and I'm going to ask you all to find one thing. I'll come to that later. But anyway, so did you all understand why our test data should be as balanced as possible?
Yes, Bhaiya.
Yes.
Yes, Bhaiya.
Okay. So like you can see how easy this was to just use sklearn. So if you're using sklearn, the actual trouble starts happening when you're dealing with imbalanced problems, like I described the cancer problem. In that case, you cannot just use this bare model. You have to give some hyperparameters. You have to tune it. Then we'll talk about regularization also today. Luckily, we have a lot of time, so it's good. I really wanted to talk about bias and variance, and we'll come to that. Okay, so now I did this whole thing again, and here I only took two features. Like I didn't take gender. It's a very simple reason why I've not taken gender. Can anyone explain why I've not taken gender? It has to do with this plot. Okay, so look, we can plot 3D figures, but usually our graphs are 2D, right? So that's why you cannot visualize all of these results. You cannot visualize the decision boundary when you have more than two features. So forget about this code. This is the same code. In this, I've ignored the gender feature. Okay. And you can see that because of that, there's some loss in accuracy also. Like here, we misclassified 11 people instead of 10. Here there were 10, and here there's 11. Because obviously, the more features we have, the more better it will be to make decisions. Okay, but mainly I just wanted to show this to you for the decision boundary. So forget how this plot is done. Okay, completely forget how this plot is done, because almost always in real life you'll never have to deal with only two features. Whenever you do machine learning, you'll have like 5-6 features at least. Okay, so you'll never be able to plot and visualize it. But nevertheless, this is a decision boundary. So can anyone tell me what this decision boundary is doing?
It is creating a boundary, like all the values at the right will have 1 as the classification, and the others will have 0.
Okay, so why is this such a weird scale? Like, why is our age in this range, and why is our estimated salary in this range?
Feature scaling.
They are
Yeah.
normal.
Yeah, exactly. So that is why this is happening, and here you can clearly see. So this line actually is a function of theta. Okay, when I say that it's a function of theta, I actually want to show this to you.
T of value.
Yeah, so I'll just show this to you.
So you want to study in UK?
This is how you get the boundary. So this is, I hope you all have gone through this video to see it completely, but I'll just explain quickly here. So say after gradient descent, the job of gradient descent is to give us optimized value for theta. So say our value is -3, 1 and 1. So in that case, we put it here, like we'll put it here in this function. And okay, so one very important thing is, why does theta transpose x have to be greater than equal to 0? So this is theta transpose x, right? Because this is theta multiplied by x. So why does this have to be greater than 0? First, I need an explanation for why this has to be greater than 0 if you're trying to predict that y is equal to 1. It has to do with the sigmoid function graph I've shown you. So let's see the graph. Here you can see that the moment our x-axis is above 0, that means the moment the x-axis is positive, we get a threshold of 0.5. Okay, so now we are assuming that if our probability is 0.5 and above, we'll get, our prediction is 1, and if the probability is below 0.5, then the prediction is 0. So if y is equal to 1, can you see that the x values are always positive? And what is x? I explained what x is, right? X is theta transpose x. So assume that this is called, a function z. So this is sigmoid of z. So you can see that whenever z is greater than 0, probability is greater than 0.5. And if probability is greater than 0.5, we assume that our prediction is 1. Otherwise, we assume that our prediction is 0. So you can see that for our prediction to be 1, or our x-axis has to be greater than 0. And what is the x-axis? That is theta transpose x. So that is why here he's put greater than equal to 0. And I know how, like I'm hoping you guys can solve this equation. So when you take 3 to the other side, you get this, right? You get x1 plus x2 is equal to 3, is greater than equal to 3. So this is the equation of a straight line, right? I'll just okay, so for some reason my thumb. So you guys can, so if I have x1 plus x2 is equal to 3, can anyone tell me the intercept and the intercept and slope of this line?
Slope is 1.
What is the intercept
Slope is -1, I think slope is.
and what is the slope? Okay, get this in the form of y is equal to mx plus c. This is basic straight lines.
Yeah.
Can anyone tell me what the
Intercept is 3 and slope is -1.
What happened? Are you guys not understanding?
Is it
Okay,
slope
so
is
the
-1 and intercept is 3
The intercept is 3
and slope
and
is
the slope
-1?
is 1, because I can write this as x2 is equal to 3 minus x1, right? So here the intercept will become 3 and the slope will become the coefficient here. So this is 1 times x1. That is why
So it should be -1.
slope is -1. That is why slope is -1. Okay, and you can see this is exactly what we are getting here. This is how we plot the line. So once you get x1 plus x2 is equal to 3, you plot the line here, and then you get a decision boundary. So everything above that is y is equal to 1, everything below that is y is equal to 0. So using that logic, we have got this. Using that logic, we have got this plot. Okay. Okay. So now, are there any questions you want to ask? because I want to explain about bias and variance once. So no one wants to ask anything? No doubt?
No, Vijay.
Okay. So now I'll just try and show you what bias is. Okay, so now let's look at regression. Okay, it's the same for classification. It's the same for any machine learning task. But say all of these are your data points, and you're trying to pass a line. Okay, so now let's look at the case of underfitting. Okay, we'll explore what underfitting is first. So is this line? Say this is a model line learned by the model.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
The other screen is not visible right now.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so now is it visible?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so you can see that in this underfitting case, say these are our data points and we are trying to predict y based on x. We only have one feature x and we are trying to predict y. So this is the line our model has learned. So can you tell me what problems there are with this line? I'm talking about the underfitting case.
It is not
There are
predicting the right value.
Yeah, there are several data which is not in that line.
Yeah, and if you actually take the sum of squared errors, like if you take this point minus the distance here and square it, you'll see that this distance is very high. Okay, so that is why it's not fitting well. That this is a case of underfitting, and this happens. I want you all to write this down somewhere if you can write it or just remember it. So this usually happens when the model hasn't learned well. Now there may be several cases why the model hasn't learned well. Okay, some things are just tough to predict. So if I try and predict the number of I don't know, the number of tigers getting killed every day in the world, it's uneven. Okay, it's not like, even based on several features, you still cannot for sure say that there's no trend like the way there is with housing, where you can obviously say that if your house is next to the sea, if your house is in a good city, or if you have a big house, the price will be high. You cannot say something like that with the case of, say, tigers getting killed or something. Okay, because it's uneven. It depends on how they are being poached, what is happening. And so sometimes, because of the nature of the problem, it may not be fit for regression. So obviously, machine learning cannot solve all problems. There are some problems which cannot be predicted well, and that goes into the case of underfitting. But more importantly, this happens when the machine hasn't learned well. So say I have a very small data set. Say I have a data set of only 10 values, and I'm trying to predict housing prices. So in that case, the model won't learn well, right? Because say in all those 10 values, I only had one kind of house. So I had a very expensive kind of house which was in a good area. So when I'm making predictions, say I have a small house in a village, in that case it won't be able to predict the housing price correctly. Okay, because it won't be able to learn the decision boundary properly. So underfitting happens when the model hasn't learned well, and there can be several reasons, but the most common reason is that your model hasn't trained on enough data. So remember this or write it down. So if you train the model less, like if you don't train it on enough data, then there are always chances that your model will underfit. Okay, at the same time, can anyone tell what overfitting is? This is very important because underfitting barely happens. Okay, now we have like, none of us are going to at this point tackle problems, like real life problems where underfitting actually occurs. When you go to Kaggle, when you try to apply machine learning machine learning to a data set, you'll always end up overfitting and not underfitting. Now, can anyone explain what overfitting is?
training the model to the train set a lot. Like it is not able to predict the test set values better, but it is able to predict the training set values.
Yeah. Okay. So that is exactly what it is. But I'll try and give a more. I'll try and give a very interesting use case that I saw recently. I read about this. So so basically, in a dating app, say you have a dating app, okay, and in the dating app, basically we're trying to profile a person, and we are trying to see how many matches that person gets. And through some analysis, we find that guys who are tall, and this is the actual truth. So we find that guys who are actually tall are they tend to get more number of matches, obviously, because I don't know, maybe there's a preference for tall guys or whatever it is. But say that okay, so this is happening that if your height is say it's 5'9" or 5'10", you end up getting more matches. But the only problem is that this data that we had trained our model on was obtained from India. Okay, now say that I go to Russia, okay, where usually the average height of men is around 6 feet. And in that case, I may start seeing a trend that the guys need to be even taller. So there, to be considered tall, you have to be like 6'3" or 6'4" probably. And that in that case, will this model work? Because say okay, now say y is something we are trying to predict. Y is the number of matches a guy will get, and x is his height. So all of say this whole range of points of x here is from 5'8" to 5'10". But when I have so say I have something like say I have 6'5". So in that case, again the model won't be able to learn properly, right? Because it's predicting such a rigid line based on data that it's only seen so far. Whereas if you have here something here, you'll see that okay, maybe you can generally, like, you can spot a trend that initially it's low, but then as the height increases, people start getting more and more matches. And then of course when you go to like 6'7", 6'8", where it's something like a freakish height, maybe people don't prefer that. Okay, I'm just giving a very vague example. This is just what came to my mind. But did you all understand what overfitting is? And basically overfitting will occur when your model is trying to learn too much from training data, and it won't be able to like make use of that data when it sees new values. So if I have a value here, say I have a value in this area only, you can see these 2 points. Can you see these 2 points, how close they are? So say that those are these 2 points here, and you can see there's a clear line here connecting them, whereas here it's passing between those two. So it's giving a more balanced value of y. So did you all understand overfitting, or do you all want more explanation?
Understood.
Okay, so like I said, underfitting occurs. I told you when underfitting occurs. Now, can you guys tell me when overfitting will occur? Just use your logic and just think when overfitting will occur. So underfitting occurs because the model hasn't learned well. It occurs maybe because we have less data and the model cannot learn everything from that data. Whereas overfitting occurs when the model has learned something very, very specific and that cannot be generalized well. So what is that? In what case do you think that will happen?
When we have optimized the theta matrix so much that it will start overfitting.
Yeah, when the cost is exactly close to zero, that is one very, very good point. Another point, when I'm training on too much data is not a bad thing. Firstly, I want to stress on that, but it's very important to have diverse data. So if we are taking housing prices, and if I only have data related to, say I have a data of 1 billion houses, but a million houses, but all of those million houses are expensive houses all across the world. So they'll obviously have similar features. In that case, I'm not able to learn well about some medium price house or some house, or say I have a data set which has extreme, so it has data about very expensive houses and very low houses, so it'll learn a very specific decision boundary, but it does not have that much data about houses in the medium range, so it won't be able to predict that very well. So also, along, of course, having enough data is a requisite, because otherwise the model won't be able to learn only. But sometimes if you feel that you have a lot of data and you feel that your decision boundary is very specific, what you can try to do is reduce the data. But of course, you cannot say in advance that you can, this is one dimension, so I can visualize this boundary, but in higher dimensions I can't visualize the boundary. So how people firstly find out about overfitting and underfitting is that say my training accuracy, and this is very important, I want you guys to listen to this very carefully. So say my training accuracy is in classification. Now let's come to classification. The same thing where I had trained on 500 data points, and after the model, my accuracy on the training set was 100%, but my accuracy on the test set was only 50%. So is that overfitting or underfitting?
Overfitting.
Overfitting. Because we are getting a very good value on the training set, but we cannot make that generalized to our test set. And okay, so what if we have 100% on our training set and 100% on our test set? In that case, is it underfitting or overfitting? When I have 100% training and test accuracy, is it underfitting or overfitting?
I think it is good balance.
Yeah, good. So it's neither underfitting nor is it overfitting. It's a very good balance, because whatever we have learned is making sense, and we are seeing that it's working when we are testing things. Now, underfitting is that I have 50% training accuracy, and right there you don't even need to see the testing accuracy. Once you see that, okay, I only have 50% training accuracy, it means that it's not able to understand anything from the training data. So right there you can see underfitting. Okay, but obviously if you take training data with 50% accuracy and you try to make a test set prediction, most likely you'll get a low accuracy only. You'll get something like 40% or 30%. So you'll understand what underfitting is. When the accuracy itself on the training data is coming out to be very low, you can see that it is underfitting clearly. Okay, so we'll talk about regularization maybe towards the end. And I want to show you one more important thing. So people usually use regularization to combat overfitting, because like I said, 99% of the times you'll face overfitting and not underfitting, because you already have a data set. You have very strong, I'm just showing, like we've just seen linear regression and logistic regression, but right now there are crazy machine learning models. So they have adaptive boosting trees, they have gradient boosting trees, extreme gradient boosting. So all of these make very good predictions, and you'll almost never be underfitting, but then these are prone to overfitting. Okay, so there's something called as regularization, which we'll see at the very end, because it's a little mathematical. Now, one very important thing I want to show you is this. So I told you about the documentation, okay, and how you search for anything is, say, I want to see how logistic regression is implemented in sklearn. So I'll just search for logistic regression sklearn, and the first thing that I'll get is this documentation. Okay, so now coming to this documentation, you will see how to fit it. They'll give you examples here. If you scroll down, you'll get examples of how logistic regression was fit. Okay, so you can see we have done exactly this. We've not taken a random state. Random state is just something so that every time you fit the prediction, you'll get the same value. Basically, it's a random value. So here you can see that I have right now not fit with anything specific. So here you can see that I'm just initializing logistic regression without any parameters. But tomorrow we'll be seeing that these parameters are actually used for something. Okay, and these parameters will be very helpful. So what you should do always is try and read about the parameters. Now I've not told you about regularization. It's also called penalization. So here you can see different types of regularization techniques. But one very important thing that is there in these parameters is to address imbalanced classification. Okay, and I've not seen a lot of people use this. Like what they try and do is they try to balance the data. They create extra data points using sport and very advanced techniques and try and balance the stuff. But this is a very simple concept. And if you see how it was, so like for example, for the cancer data where it was very imbalanced, if you fit a model like this, like we fit without any special parameters, you'll most likely get a bad result. Okay, like you'll get a very high accuracy, but you'll see that it's not useful. So one of these parameters helps you with that. Now what I want you to do for tomorrow is, and I'll ask this at the beginning of class, and I really hope to get an answer, because otherwise there's not much use if you guys don't explore things yourself. So there's one parameter from all of these parameters, you read them, and that addresses this class imbalance. Okay, so read the description of each parameter. You won't understand all the parameters first thing, so don't get scared. You just have to understand that one parameter which doesn't have any prerequisite, and you have to explain it to me. Okay, so tomorrow, did you guys understood how to go to the documentation, right? How to find the documentation. So this is how you have to, for any model you're learning. Like last week we saw linear regression. Always go to the sklearn page and read about the parameters and see the examples. They'll most likely explain. Now I'm not saying that you'll understand everything that's there on this page. It takes some time to understand all of this, but for tomorrow, I want you guys to tell me about this, about one of these features which actually helps with imbalanced classification. Okay, so understood everyone for tomorrow what you have to do. And in addition to that, I'll also send one very good article on metrics they use for classification models. Like I already explained to you, accuracy is not good for classification. Accuracy is not a good metric unless you're very sure that your data is very well balanced. It's of no use. So we'll see metrics we use when accuracy is of little importance. And I'll actually share that article. Again, that article will be a maximum of 10 minutes or 15-minute read. So go through that before coming to class. And also, tell me about this feature. This is the first thing I'll ask you tomorrow. Tell me about the feature that helps with imbalanced classification. Okay. So, now I'll take doubts. I'm done with what I wanted to teach. But you can ask anything you want. You can ask me about logistic regression, linear regression, because I'm assuming some of you may have forgotten some things because of CAT, or even if you want to ask anything about overfitting, underfitting, anything you didn't understand.
Bhaiya, when do we understand that our model is being underfitted, or the other cases when we are using a wrong classification model, like we have multiple models, right?
So when you have multiple models, this is a good question, and this is not discussed so far. You actually don't see it through underfitting, overfitting, and again, a lot of people make this mistake of seeing. They see that this model has achieved good accuracy, or forget accuracy, a good F1 score, which is another metric. So we'll choose this model. But what you actually have to do is, there's a metric called ROC AUC, that is area under curve of ROC curve. You have to plot the ROC curve for various models, and then whichever model has the best AUC for the ROC curve, you have to choose that model. And I'll share that article today and you'll understand it better. But what I'm trying to say is that when you have multiple models, one more very important thing today was threshold. So do you guys have like 5 minutes extra? I'll just quickly talk about threshold.
Yeah.
Okay, so threshold was today. What threshold basically means is that today we saw that if you have something above 0.5, then it's predicted as 1. And when you have something less than 0.5, then then that goes away. Okay, so that is predicted as 0. But now, like take the cancer case for example. In that, if we have a probability of 0.6, should we say that the person has cancer?
Yes, because it is greater than 0.5.
Yeah, but that is not good, right? Because
that is not good. Yes,
it is not good. So actually, by default, the threshold is always 0.5. And again, I've seen a lot of beginners, they never pay attention to threshold and they never adjust it. but and this affects the F1 score metric also, which I'll show tomorrow. But say when we have sensitive problems like cancer, we want to be very, very confident about what we are predicting. So I told you that the value that a classifier gives is a probability. So probability of 0.6 is not, at least for me, if I was a doctor, it's not enough to tell me conclusively that, okay, this person has cancer. What I'd want to see rather is, I'd like to see a value close to 1. I'd like to see 0.8 or 0.9, something like that, which will show that, okay, this is actually cancer and it's very, very probable. So you can adjust the threshold also. And ROC actually takes into consideration all thresholds. That's why you have, that's why it's good when you're predicting with different models. And I think Abhay asked this. So one other way of identifying underfitting, overfitting is through so what you asked was model selection. So I spoke about model selection, and you also asked about underfitting, overfitting. So I told you underfitting, overfitting, you have to see through training accuracy and test accuracy. And accuracy in case of linear, in case of balanced classification. Otherwise, you have to use another metric. But basically, you have to see that the metric that you are using for evaluation, if that is good for both the training set and the test set, then your model is good. If it's only good for trainings and it's low for test, then it's overfitting. And if it's low for training only, it's underfitting. Okay. Anything else?
I want to ask about the variance, high variance and low variance. What does it mean? Like it is in good balance, there is a low variance, but in high, where high, I forgot
Yeah, okay.
what
So
the.
variance and bias are interchangeable in terms which are interchangeable for overfitting and underfitting. So bias is underfitting, okay, and variance is overfitting. Okay, so it's just a different name. I'll talk about that more in detail. Like, if you want, I'll explain using bias the terms bias, variance tomorrow, and why overfitting is called is associated with variance, and why underfitting is associated with bias. It's just a simple convention why they've named it like that. I'll explain that tomorrow. But anything else? So
No,
bias
nothing else.
variance is, yeah, bias variance is just overfitting, underfitting, nothing else. Any doubts about, again, how many of you all had honestly seen the videos? Anyone who hadn't seen them, I can understand this week maybe you all had CAT, so you didn't get enough time. But always make sure you see the videos, even if you can see them later on. Yeah, so okay, please make it a point to see those videos, because you cannot learn machine learning in even a month. I think if you want a good hold of machine learning, you have to dive right into it for a good 5-6 months, and then you get a very good grasp. But just learning superficially is not enough. And like I said, you'll actually really enjoy the videos. He's one of the best teachers in the world, at least best teacher that I have seen for machine learning. He teaches at Stanford. And what is very remarkable is how easily he teaches. For obviously he does not even like involve very complex mathematics. He tries and teaches through intuition more, so that, because this course that he's teaching is an introduction to machine learning, so it's not meant for people from CS backgrounds alone. So you'll really enjoy the course if you see those videos. So yeah, like for tomorrow, I'll just send you an article on evaluation metrics for classification. Read that. Any other doubts?
You had asked about that feature encoding thing.
Yeah.
Like
Did
the
you
you
find
asked about.
anything?
Yeah, I didn't get a good answer of it. Like some answer were to use different encoding techniques. One was to use target encoding.
Yeah, that is what I wanted you to. Yeah, actually, okay, yeah, good. So target encoding. Did you read about it?
Yeah, it was like the basic. It was like getting the probability. Like I could relate it to probability somehow.
Yeah, it is exactly related to probability. So in the last week, I'll tell you more techniques about imputations, clever techniques like target encoding. There's actually median target encoding. There are a lot of techniques. Okay, so since you've brought this up, I'll just take 5 more minutes, and I'll actually, in the code today, I'd actually tried and just to show you what was happening. I wanted to, okay, so say I have taken the first 5 values of this data set, which is male, male, female, female, male, and I've tried to fit the encoder. So obviously I get this. So this is 0 for female, 1 for male, 0, because the first two are male, the next two are female. So this is nothing new. But okay, so remember, whenever you're training, you use fit or fit transform. and whenever you're testing, you always use transform. Always, never ever use fit again. Never ever use fit again. You always have to use transform when you're testing. So I'm just so now I'm giving this a new category. Obviously, gender doesn't have the category, Raj, but just to give you an example. So in that case, you can see that it'll give me 0 and 0, right? And what is more important is this: if when I give it np.nan, which is not a number, it throws an error. So you saw that for new categories, it's just filling in zeros, but for actually NaN values, it's giving an error. So what is this error? What is the error? You can see input contains NaN, and when do we have NaN in our data set?
Or a missing value.
Yeah, missing value. So that's what I've written here. This cannot transform missing values. So always, even when you're testing, you have to make sure that you fill in the missing values before transforming it. Because if you have missing values, then this won't work. Okay, so this is basically, I wanted to show you this. And I'm very, and yeah, I'm very happy that at least one of you has actually looked into the question. So, yeah, that's good. And any other doubts? You guys can leave if you don't have any other doubts.
Okay, thank you, भैया.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bhaiya.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vijay.
Thank you.